Thank you very much. And I will now call upon sponsor Steve Vaillancourt, Representative Steve Vaillancourt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Steve Vaillancourt. I represent Manchester, Ward 8, that is Hillsborough District 15, home of the Manchester-Boston Regional Airport. I come before you on this happy Valentine's Day, not bringing love and candy and kisses, but bringing you a proposal which would negate the need to have an $80 million casino in New Hampshire, because if we legalize marijuana and tax it the way it's being done in Colorado and Washington, we would make a windfall profit. So it is marijuana afternoon. There are 3 bills before you. I'm the sponsor, the prime sponsor of the first bill, so I guess I should take a little bit of time going into this, and I have several handouts. I know your committee doesn't get nearly enough to read, he said sarcastically. First I want to talk about the reason I put this bill in. I believe that government should base its laws on consent of the governed. And when you have a certain percentage of the population that is doing something, it tells us that they want this being done. For example, I put my speed limit bill in to raise the speed limit because about 85% of the people were speeding. It appears to me, although it would seem to be difficult to get actual data, I do have some, that more people are smoking marijuana, or about as many as are smoking cigarettes. It's sad but true, or maybe it's happy but true. I believe marijuana is a substance that is less harmful than alcohol or tobacco. I believe that continuing to make marijuana illegal is bad for individuals and bad for our society. You have, on this committee, dealt with a great many issues regarding the expense of incarcerating people, and there is one bit of data I have before you that will show how expensive it is to keep people incarcerated for this. In fact, let me hand out this one first. I think of all the handouts I'm going to give you, this one is the most interesting. It's 10 facts about marijuana. It'll dispel a lot of the myths concerning how marijuana is harmful and such things as that. So I'd like you to look at that first. But I want to start with some opinion polls. We should never legislate by opinion, but it's often comfortable when we find that the opinion that most people have is what we share. So here's an opinion poll that Gallup took that was in the New York Times a year ago that showed marijuana legalization support had reached 50% for the first time. But it didn't stop there. It's now a trend that has reached 57% support in a poll just a couple of months ago that is reported by the polling outfit of PPP. If you look at this, you'll see that support is now 57%. And this wasn't a small sample. 1,325 people were sampled. 57% now support legalization. 39% only oppose it. You'll notice that I've written the numbers out in handwriting, so you don't have to read the whole thing if you choose not to. 68% of Democrats support it, 42% of Republicans, 59% of independents. People under 30, 61%, over 65, 48%. And this is in line with the results that were attained in the states of Colorado and Washington last November. As you probably heard on the news, both Colorado and Washington legalized, and in both states it was 55+%. 55.7% in Washington, 55.3% in Colorado. So I start out with a trump card that we've often not had when this issue has come before you before, that it's now been legalized by a fairly substantial margin in 2 states, and that by even more substantial margin, almost a landslide, it is now supported by opinion polls. So should New Hampshire become the 3rd state to legalize not just medical marijuana, but marijuana for all purposes? I say absolutely. Would this lead to increased use of marijuana? I say absolutely not, and we need look no farther than one of my favorite countries in the world, the Netherlands. Holland is just one of the provinces there, but the Netherlands, a country of about 15 million people. Amsterdam, maybe you visited, wonderful tables, houses, and canals, and the Bulldog Tavern. where you could go get a joint if you so chose. But look at this statistic. This is really an eye-opener because it shows that in the United States, nearly 41% of people have used marijuana. In the Netherlands, where it's legal, less than 23% have used marijuana. In the past year, in the United States, more than 10% have used it. In the Netherlands, just 5%. It also shows that the rate of incarceration in the United States is 756 per 100,000 people. In the Netherlands, it's only 100 per 100,000 people, so a rate of 7.5 times as much in this country as in the Netherlands, where marijuana is legal. And the homicide rate in the Netherlands, 1.1 for 100,000. In the United States, 5.0 for 100,000. If you look at per capita spending, those are in euros, that little silly symbol there, I believe that's a euro. You can see the Netherlands spends 223 euros per capita. In the criminal justice system, we spend 379. It seems to me that the war on drugs should continue, but not for marijuana. We should focus on the drugs that are truly harmful to our society. Heroin, crack, I don't even know them. But if you'll read the data about the Netherlands, the handout there, you'll find that indeed the Netherlands segregate marijuana from hard drug use. You can get marijuana in a Bulldog coffee shop or many, many places in Amsterdam and the Netherlands, but not so hard drugs, because they realize that we are fighting a losing war when we're fighting to do something that 40% of Americans apparently want to do. I'm not sure how relevant this is, but I'll hand you out one more little chart on marijuana use around the world. It looks like the United States is third in the world according to this data, just behind New Zealand and Australia. And you can look at most of the European countries are about half of what they are in the United States. So the more you try to stop something, the more people want to do it, apparently. So I've given you many handouts that you can digest in your leisure, but the one that we should look at just a little bit is the 10 facts about marijuana, because there are so many myths. People think that marijuana is a gateway drug. It most certainly is not. In fact, a lot of people that go on to heroin, use heroin or all these other drugs, have used marijuana, but only because marijuana is used by more people than any other drug. So it's not a question of it leading to other drugs, but those other drugs, people already having done it. There's also some information here on how marijuana does not cause mental illness. There's some myths that it does that. There are claims about what marijuana does to your cognitive senses, and all the data shows that, in fact, marijuana does tend to affect short-term memory while you're on it, but has no long-term memory deterrent abilities. So this is just a tremendous paper. If you go to point number 10, police prosecuted 858,000 persons for marijuana violations in 2009, according to FBI's data. I assume they're correct. Of those 858,000 people, 88% of them, more than 758,000 people, were charged with possession only. 88% charged with possession only. We heard previous bills in this committee about how a record that you have will stay with you for your life unless you can get it annulled properly. So this is something that's with you for your life when employers go to look at something. It should not be with you. We should not be wasting more and more of tax dollars on throwing people that happen to want to smoke a joint in jail. There's also a section here on the potency of marijuana. There's a myth that it's become much more potent. In fact, the THC quantity is only about 5% today, whereas you can get these Marinol cigarettes, or pills, I should say, which are 100%. So the potency should not be an issue there. If you read one thing, read this 10 facts about marijuana. All the other is interesting. I find the data from the Netherlands extremely fascinating, because that proves that society cannot really regulate behavior that people want to do. Marijuana should be legalized. New Hampshire should become state number 3. And I guess what I'm most pleased about as I appear before you today is that I'm now in the majority in believing this. Who would have thunk it? I see other people are here to testify. I could go on and on, but I wrote 10 minutes and I will stick to that. I asked you to vote this bill ought to pass. When I filed it, I never thought it could pass, but you know, I'm beginning to become a believer.
Any questions for the representative?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for
Now,
testifying.
you're on this bill, you can't ask.
Oh, I
May
agree.
I ask a question? Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Vaillancourt, you talked a lot about all these other two states and the Netherlands and that. You really didn't talk about the substance in the bill. And the thing I wanted to ask, okay? If I may ask you, how are you gonna do the retail stores and how would it be set up? I know you got it in the bill, but you really didn't talk about the facts of the bill.
Thank you for that question. This bill is exactly, well, I shouldn't say exactly, because there may be some words different here and there. This is what Colorado voters approved. And I often come before you, when people come before this committee and say, well, how have other states done this? Because there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So instead of trying to draft a bill to legalize and tax it at the same time, I went to what the voters of Colorado said by a 55 to 45% margin. So that is what this bill is. It's just a reiteration of what has already been approved in Colorado. If there's a specific question, I think a subcommittee probably should look at all the specifics if you want to get into that, because it would require probably hours and hours, and I would prefer that we not get into specifics at this time, but it's your committee. Oh, it's my committee, isn't it?
One more question.
Follow-up?
Do you think that New Hampshire, since we're a great state and all this, that we should always do what other states do?
Absolutely not. We should do what only 2 other states have done. But even if those 2 other states have not done it, I would say we should do this. We should do it because it's right, because we should not be making criminals out of people who want to smoke a joint rather than get bombed out of their gourd on alcohol. The fact that only 2 states have done it proves that we can be in the forefront of this once again, as we have been in so many things, including we were the first state in the country for a legislature to pass gay marriage without having to override a governor's veto. So we should be in the forefront as we have been so many other times. This is the live free or die state. This is the libertarian state. That's why we should do it.
Representative Ginsburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative, let me make this a 2-part question. 1, do you have any idea about a fiscal note and when we might expect to see one? And 2, do you have any sort of estimate about what kind of revenue we might expect?